dad studied law, so have to end up reading the document. So when we take a look at systems in our at Zephyr, we go down to all aspects of it. Also, I wasn't given a choice to speak, so I'm going to call Irfan Sab out because he's the one who got me to speak today. The topic that I suggested I talk on is really to look at where the disconnect is between building generation assets, where we've gotten stuck in Pakistan, and also to see which direction would be sensible to go, given that we all talk about renewable energy infrastructure, but what is the easiest way to get there? Now, Sir earlier was talking about 2019 policy. Aisha on my left side was talking about Aisha was engineer Aisha was talking about renewable energy cost of generation. So there's a lot of disconnects between what is reality and what is perception. So that's the conversation to be had. I'm going to get to the end point first, where second paragraph I talk about renewable energy adoption and hybridization of solar in order for us to get to a significant expansion of renewables with limited cost, which is hybridization. Today we have about 1.8 gigawatts of wind in Pakistan, with 3.6 gigawatts of. We have over 1.8 gigawatts of wind in our systems, but we have 3.6 gigawatts of transformers on the high voltage side of it. So the question ends up being, where does this concept of N-1 come in for renewable energies? Because globally, when you visit assets in Turkey and the States, that concept of N-1 on the plant side does not exist. So if there's an initiative to move towards significant adoption of renewable energy, you have 1.8 gigawatts of wind with 3.6 gigawatts of solar, 3.6 gigawatts of transformers, and you have assets that are essentially aging for no reason in the process. But there ends up being an issue in terms of what's the basis of optimization, because it's not just a technical solution. There's a regulatory issue, there's an environmental issue, there's a legal issue that has to be considered in different stakeholders on the provincial basis and on the federal basis that have to be considered. The reason I wanted to touch on conditions precedents, because that's more of a legal term, but it's really what needs to be done before we get to the conclusion of doing a hybridization of renewable energy, in particular on the wind side. I get straight to the point. Policy-wise, the policies exist. 2019 policy does consider hybridization, but the mechanism requires for you to do an adoption, requires you to do competitive bidding. There isn't a different avenue, because solar is a technology that is not a new technology, it's a mature technology, so by the policy you have to do competitive bidding. The question ends up being, what is the mechanism for existing assets to do competitive bidding, because we've already signed all the agreements in terms and conditions. Policy-wise, I've just touched on it, but what's the methodology to get us to the lowest cost of generation in the process? First question, an issue we had a number of years ago was, where does metering happen? For power generation assets, and I can hear somebody talking, that's fine. For power generation, metering typically happens on the high voltage basis. That is today unnecessary. The policy, the 2033 grid code gives you the flexibility to actually end up doing metering on a different location, and the argument that I would make is that you should actually do metering on the medium voltage basis before you get to the transformers to leverage the existing assets that you have. So meter on the medium voltage, if you're a generating asset, you assign the cost of that loss to the higher cost of electricity, and you have a win-win situation for all parties. And the cost of installing, let's say Zephyr is a 50 megawatt project, 100 megawatts of transformers. If you optimize on on not having N-1, that's 60 megawatts of transformers. You can simply do the math. It's an incremental cost to to add additional generation if you're leveraging the existing infrastructure, and nominal cost to NTDC in the process. The other issue you have is, what's the basis of optimization? Right? Are you optimizing based on land? Are you optimizing based on generation license? Because as Tasif Saab knows, generation license for us is a 50 megawatt project. I can generate 100 megawatts, but at the end of the day, I'm limited at 50 megawatts. So is the generation license a flexible discussion where we turn around and say, we want to optimize based on all available resources? We control 2,540 acres of land. So ultimately, if we were doing an optimal system, we would end up doing a system that's a 60 megawatt solar with minimum effect on our existing generation. Now, Zephyr is a highly efficient system. So the smaller the system would be on solar than one of the original projects. Engineer Aisha talked about mentioned the earlier projects, the 4G1, 4G2. That capacity factor is about 70% of what Zephyr and the 9, 10 new projects that came online are able to generate. So the thinking, the concept, the engineering answer is there. Medium voltage, you're good to go. Availability of land, you're good to go. But how do you get through all the regulatory frameworks and the approvals for us to actually end up in a situation where the engineering solution, which we all know is there, right? 22 kVA MV switchgear, spare panels in the MV switchgear, and no issues on the SCADA, because all you do is put in another SCADA on the front end of the system. But we're not there. We should, with the 2019 policy, we should have already been able to deploy 2 gigawatts of solar, but we are not. And the question is why? And it's not a technical issue. There are larger conversations at hand in terms of how are we going to expand. The conversation, government of Pakistan was talking about 600 megawatts of solar. We bid it twice on the global platform, 0 bidders. KE, I'm sorry, KE is sitting here. There's KE over here, my apologies in advance. But KE is going about, thank you. You can tell Mudassar I was on stage, he'll be very upset with me. KE is bidding out its solar projects. I have a lot of admiration for it. I don't agree, because I think there's a significant amount of existing generation, and I think it's a financial solution that should be found rather than the technology solution, because ultimately it's not about capacity. It's about being able to provide economical electricity for the long-term basis, and that is really what is being missed out. Because today, with the way things are going, we are not bankable as a sector. People have talked about curtailment. Who has heard that wind projects get curtailed? I just want to get a show of hands. Does anyone know what curtailment is? Not everyone. हवा चल रही है, मेरे टर्बाइन बंद पड़े हैं, और आप हमें मुफ्त में पैसे दे रहे हैं. शुक्रिया. That is the problem that we have. So even before we get to this conversation, you have to look at the issues you have today in the space, and it's not an issue of the intention, it's an issue of the limitations that we have in the existing system. We have world-class assets. For me, Zephyr is a world-class asset. The standards that our IPPs are built at are some of the best in the world. I've spent time in Japan, I worked out there, did some training in Turkey, spent time in the States. We have world-class assets in Pakistan from the private sector side. Question ends up being, when are you going to? How many minutes? 4. I'm going to take 7. I'm the last speaker. So the point ends up being, we need to get to a closure of the gaps that we have. EPA, N-1 criteria. Right, I'm supposed to have 2 lines. I have 1. 150 megawatts Zephyr to Naga Hydro China, 100, going 80 kilometers on one cell route. Tower falls, my responsibility. Maintenance, not done. We went for a shutdown a few weeks ago to say, hum shutdown kar rahe hain, hame shutdown nahi lena hai, but we don't have N-1, so please pay us the penalty that you should pay us.